Hi and welcome to another narration presented by yours truly, Cryptids Roost. Please be so kind as to throat punch the like button and smack the ass of the subscription button as well. And remember to tap the notification bell and then select all. That way you'll receive all notifications each time I upload a new video. Oh, and don't forget to share the video far and wide. This will all help with YouTube's algorithm and will help promote the channel more. And if you're going to leave a dislike, please be so kind as to comment why. That way I can review what you didn't like about the video and I can possibly make changes in future videos. Thank you. If you enjoy listening to the following story, be sure to pop over to the author's Reddit profile and drop them a line, or even give them a glowing review. I'm sure they would appreciate it. The link to their Reddit profile will be below in the description. So grab your coffee, sit back and enjoy the show. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not. The Girl from Venus. This fantastic story is written by Odd Directions, a wonderful author over on Reddit's NoSleep subreddit. What happened to your face? That was the first thing Zahira said to me when I met her on the island. Are you okay? That black eye looks nasty. Dad had just hit me after I yelled at him for kicking Luna. I fell on my bike, I lied. It's nothing to worry about. We talked a little bit about Luna. Zahira liked her, patted her on the head with a huge smile on her face, and asked what breed she was. She's a corgi, I said. It was my mom's, but she died, so... Zahira said she was sorry, and I lied again and said it was okay. A gunshot echoed across the island. What's that sound? Zahira asked. It's scaring the birds. It's my dad, I said. He's just practicing his aim. This was the third time I ran from the house since my dad brought me to Brick Island, where my late mom's summer house was located. My heart was beating fast from the adrenaline pumping through my veins, but seeing Zahira's innocent expression on her face helped me relax in some sense, helped me feel more like I pretended to feel. I'm John, by the way, I said, smiling for the first time since forever. She told me her name. I thought it was unusual. She looked a bit different too, at least to my young mind, with a dusky skin and green sequin dress. Being too young to understand in what way it could be considered rude, it inspired me to ask where she was from. I'm from Venus, she said, laughing when she saw the look of disbelief on my face. But right now, I'm staying in one of the houses on this island. I saw a documentary about Venus, I said. It's too hot for people to live there. That's not true, she said, but it doesn't matter. I don't expect you to believe me. She was a weirdo, I thought, but I was still happy to have found someone closer to my age on the island. Usually it was just occupied by retired couples and old fishermen. Zahira was only a couple of years older than me, perhaps 16. We continued down to the water. I asked if she'd like video games. She loved them, but I had never heard of the ones that she was talking about. At this point, I had almost forgotten about my dad. I finally felt normal, which was anything but normal. Then I heard the four-wheeler coming down the dirt road. Luna barked, knowing full well what it meant, and I immediately tensed up. Dad stopped the vehicle and walked towards us. When he saw that I wasn't alone, he changed his demeanour and added a smile. There you are, buddy, he said with the kind of voice he only used when we weren't alone. It's time to come home and eat some dinner. I'm sure Luna is hungry as well. There was nowhere for us to run. We were on an island, after all. Okay, I said, avoiding meeting his eyes. Then I turned to Zahira. I have to go. It was nice meeting you. She stayed at the water, watching me as my dad drove me back to the house. The sun was still shining, making the leaves on the oaks and maple trees glimmer like emeralds. but it was still just as if a giant shadow had fallen upon me. I held Luna in my arms, wetting her fur with my tears, while the bumpy road made it look like the entire world was shaking, but Zahira stood firm, suspended in a sunbeam. I knew what was coming. I let go of Luna outside the house, fearing Dad would do something to her as well. He sat me down on the bed and put his large hand on my thigh. "You and I are going to have a little chat," he said with a hateful rage in his eyes. "Who was that girl?" Luna was barking outside, wanting me to come outside. "That fucking dog," my dad exclaimed. "It will be the death of me, I swear to God." He took a deep breath. "Who was that girl you were with?" Don't you fucking dare say I don't know. You know I hate that answer. Who was that girl? Don't make me ask again, okay? His grip on my thigh tightened. I could see his patience wither away with his stern face. I wanted to cry, but I held back my tears. It would just make him angrier if he saw me cry. "I met her by accident. We just talked." "Must have been the new neighbour's kid," my dad interrupted, talking to himself. "You didn't tell her about the black eye, did you? 'Cause you know what would happen if you did, right?" He didn't care for my answer. "I would take your beloved little Luna to the shed." He didn't need to say more than that. I knew he was serious. Just 1 year earlier he had flushed my goldfish after I didn't finish all the food on my plate. "I didn't." His grip tightened even more, making it hurt. "I promise," I added with a lump in my throat, but to no avail. He noticed that I was choking up, like a predator focusing on the weakest prey in the herd, and the grip got tighter. "You're never going to talk to her again. Do you understand me?" My lower lip stopped trembling and my heart skipped a beat. "Yes," I said, but it was too late. It only took a second, but it was enough for him to spot my hesitation, and the grip tightened even more. The warmth from my tears running down my face spread through my body as if they tried to comfort me with their embrace. "Are you going to talk to that girl again?" my dad asked. "No," I said, but his grip just kept growing stronger. I squirmed out of pain. He raised his voice. "Are you going to talk to that girl again or not?" "No, I promise," I cried. "I won't." "That's good," he finally said, "because if you do, you're eating dog stew for dinner." And just like that, he released his grip and left the room. I crawled up in the corner of the bed, crying my eyes out into my feather pillow. The next day that I saw that I had gotten a large bruise on my leg, and the only thing I thought was how bad it was that he didn't hurt me higher up, since this meant I couldn't wear shorts outside anymore. I saw Zahira again a few days later while walking Luna. She was still wearing the same clothes as before. I was afraid to approach her again, thinking about my dad's threats. It wasn't worth another beating, I thought, and was just about to turn around when Luna, unaware of the danger, began walking down the slope while wagging her tail. I whispered for her to stop, but she didn't listen, and I followed her with my heart in my throat. Zahira was sitting on a stump next to an anthill. I could hear her speak, almost in a whisper, but there was no one else there. She was caught by surprise when she saw me, as if I startled her, but as soon as she realised it was me, she smiled, the kind of smile that my mum used to give me before she died. It made me feel warm inside, but also somehow sad, just because I knew what a rarity it was. "Hey," she said. "Who are you talking to?" I asked, looking at an ant climbing up on my sneaker. "Lolo," she said. "It's my—" She interrupted herself. "It doesn't matter. No one else can see him anyway. I only talk to him when I'm lonely. He's not much of a friend." "I used to do that a lot," I said. "When my mom died, I had this imaginary friend, but I stopped talking to him when I was 8. Now I'm 11, so I don't know, I guess." "I won't be able to talk to Lolo for much longer," she said. He's dying. I thought it was strange that she still had an imaginary friend, since she was a bit older than me even, and I certainly didn't get how an imaginary friend could be dying. But I didn't mind. I already knew she was a bit of a weirdo. The ants fascinate me, she said, seemingly trying to change the subject. I've been looking at them all day. They're almost like people, but more organised. I picked up a stick and poked at the nest, agitating the ants. We're like giants to them, I said. Do you think they're afraid of us? Of course, she said, as she reached down and removed some ants from Luna's fur. But we're just like them, and giants are looking down on us as well. I've seen them. You're weird, I said with a smile. Is that bad? She asked. No, I said. No, I said. I think you're cool. Oh, that's good, she said, but still looking a bit unsure. Let's take a walk. I want to show you something. I need to get back to the house, I said. I was just supposed to take Luna for a short walk, and my dad... I looked down on my shoes again. I don't want him to get worried. Your dad isn't nice, is he? She asked. He's the reason you look sad, isn't he? I felt my heartbeat in my throat. She was so close to figuring it all out, my biggest secret, and a voice inside of me screamed at me to open up and tell her everything. And the closer I got to that decision, the faster my pulse beat. In the end, I just said, he's okay. I could see that she didn't believe me, but she didn't push it. Let's meet up later, she said. I'll be at the pier. Dad was watching horse racing from his armchair, clutching the ticket with his fat hand. There were several beer cans on the floor next to him. Where have you been? He said. You're late. I wasn't, but it didn't matter. I should beat you for that, he mumbled. Fetch me another beer. His breath already reeked of alcohol. I went to the kitchen, but I couldn't find any more beer in the refrigerator. I panicked, knowing too well what would happen if I returned empty-handed. I looked through all of the kitchen cabinets and every shelf in the pantry, feeling my skin tingle out of anxiety. Where the fuck is my beer? I heard my dad yell from the living room. The next race is about to start. I swear to God if you... Just as he said that, I found another pack of beers under the sink. I breathed a sigh of relief, opened it up and grabbed one of the bottles. Why the fuck did you bring me one of the new bottles? My dad yelled when I gave it to him. Didn't you see the fucking can next to the milk? My lower lip trembled. I cursed myself for having missed it. Just like your fucking mother, he said. I froze as my heart swelled with a futile hatred. That was one thing I couldn't get used to, the one thing I could never accept when he talked about Mom. Well, don't just stand there, you worthless piece of shit. He didn't notice the horses racing down the track. Now you have to bring me the fucking bottle opener, he smiled at me ironically. Go! I ran to the kitchen again, scrambled through the drawers like a wild animal trying to find the bottle opener. And when I finally did, my dad yelled again. Oh, for crying out loud! I was shaking when I handed him the opener. He was furious, staring at the TV. You little piece of shit, he said as he opened the bottle. Look what you did. Look what you fucking did. I knew what he meant. It wasn't the first time he accused me of it. Somehow it was my fault that his horse hadn't won. Worthless, just like your mother. He got up, pushed me out of his way, and kicked Luna hard in the belly. I ran up to her and held her in my arms, trying to comfort her. Dad stopped when he saw it. He couldn't tolerate it. Seeing any form of affection, any form of sentimentality. It made him cringe. Just as if he was watching someone make a complete fool of themselves. Please, don't hurt, I said. He took a giant leap towards me. I hunched over Luna, protecting her with my own body. Dad smacked me 5 times with his huge open palm. It landed on the top of my head, my neck, my shoulder, and left new bruises on my body. After that, he simply walked out of the room with not so much as a word, and I thought about what Zahira had told me. giants looking down at us as well. She was lying on her back on the pier, looking up at the sky. Luna ran up to her, licking her face. Zahira laughed and sat up with a smile, but as soon as she saw my face, she looked concerned and perhaps a little bit upset. "Let me guess," she said. "You fell off your bike again." I didn't respond. "It's not your fault," she said. "You know that, right?" "Dad is asleep now," I said. "He won't wake up for a while." "Sit down," she said. I sat down next to her, listening to the water lap against the wooden beams beneath us. "Look there," she said, and pointed at a yellow shimmering dot in the evening sky. "That's where I'm from. Can you imagine? It looks so tiny from here." I wanted to impress her and repeated what they had said in the documentary. They thought it was a star at first, before they figured out it was a planet. "You were right before," she said, and looked into the water. "But it always wasn't too hot there." She looked at me with dreamy and yet somehow sad eyes. "It used to be green, filled with lush forests and dense jungles, and there were all kinds of animals walking on its continents and swimming in its oceans. And the sight of its mysterious green haze in the Earth's sky inspired man to progress and to eventually venture out into space to explore." "Is this a story?" I asked. She looked at me, smiling. "You don't believe me." "It's still a nice story," I said. "In the documentary I watched, they said there could have been water on Venus millions of years ago, just like on Mars. But then something happened that made it too hot and all the water disappeared, and now it's dead." "I know what happened," she said. "You won't believe me, but, well, it's really complicated. From my perspective, the British Empire colonised Venus at the end of the 18th century, and—" "That's impossible," I interrupted. "We didn't even have airplanes back then." "Really?" she said, looking genuinely surprised. "Well, I told you it was complicated. From my perspective, things happen much faster than it seems to have happened from your perspective. From what I can remember from school, we flew the first airplane in the year 1603 or something like that." "You really have an active imagination," I said as kindly as I could. "Don't you want me to continue?" she asked. "I know how ridiculous it must sound." "I didn't mean it like that," I said. "I want to hear your story." And I really did. It helped me forget about my own reality, at least for a moment. "Okay, well," she said, "Venus declared its independence 100 years later, and then there was an arms race followed by the Great Antimatter War that just wouldn't come to an end. In 1996, with both planets almost destroyed, we received the news that Earth had developed some kind of new superweapon. When we learned what it was already too late. They couldn't win in any other way." She fell silent for a moment and then said, "They sent a bomb back in time, making the planet uninhabitable. That's why it's too hot now. It was the only way for them to undo the damage done to Earth." Even though I thought that she was crazy, at least if she truly believed this, I really did enjoy listening to her tale. Still, there was one thing that didn't make sense to me, which I just felt I had to point out. "How come you're still alive then?" she sighed. "My parents were important people on Venus. They put me in a capsule, shielded with some kind of radiation, and sent it to Earth. It was the only craft of its kind. Because of that special radiation, it was protected against the alteration to the timeline. The British Empire throughout history would play out more or less the same, and that it would remain the sole power on Earth. But since I arrived here, I've come to understand that the small change in colour of that speck in the sky had a greater impact on history than anyone could have imagined." I looked at the evening star glimmering in the sky and thought about what it would have been like with forests and jungles on its surface. The thought of going there, walking through the rainforests on another world, triggered a yearning for a freedom that I had never experienced in real life. Such feelings were just as unreal for me as Zahira's story and my heart ached from both longing and loathing. "Fuck!" my dad yelled from inside the house. "John, get in here! On the double!" This was 2 days later. I had foolishly let myself feel something close to happiness during these days since my dad had been relatively calm, and since I had spent more time with Zahira on my walks. I was outside playing with Luna. I closed my eyes while the small amount of happiness I had built up poured out of my body. "Stay put," I said to Luna. "No, stay. Don't let me wait. You know I hate waiting," Dad yelled. "Look what you made me do," he said when I came inside. "You and your fucking dog." He had tipped over his beer. I stared at it dripping from the table. "Don't just stand there," he yelled. "Clean up your fucking mess." I knew what he was thinking. Luna had barked outside, getting him all worked up, and he had spilled his beer, so naturally it must have been my fault for playing with Luna. It made me want to scream. I heard Zahira's words over my self-deprecating thoughts. "It's not your fault, you know that, right?" I mopped the floor without saying a word, thinking about Mom. She used to do all the cleaning before. I miss her so much. My dad was also reminded of her, seeing me clean up his beer, and said with a mouth twisted in contempt, "Just like your mother, that fucking whore." I stopped in my tracks. Perhaps it was the courage that Zahira had invoked inside me that made me open my mouth, but I instantly regretted saying it. "She wasn't a whore." "Excuse me?" My dad got up from his armchair. "What did you say?" "Nothing," I said, and continued mopping. "She wasn't a whore. Was that what you said?" He walked up to me and yelled into my ear. "Was that what you fucking said?" No, I said, trying to ignore him breathing down my neck. "She wasn't a fucking whore," he yelled, even though she never stopped talking to her so-called guy friends after I told us to. Even though she never came home on time after being out with her slutty friends from work, she was a whore. A whore. A whore. A whore. Do you hear me? A fucking whore. His saliva landed on my chin, leaving an odour of half-digested beer. I imagined the great forests of Venus. I imagined looking up at Earth and seeing nothing more than a dot in the sky. My dad was controlling as well, Zahira said, pushing her dark bangs out of her face. And it didn't matter what I did, it was never good enough. I was never good enough. We walked next to the water. Luna proudly walked in front of us with a stick in her mouth. I felt safe, even though it probably made me less safe defying my dad. But by now I considered Zahira my friend, the only one I got, except Luna. "Did he ever—" I interrupted myself and lowered my voice. "Did he ever, hit you?" "No," she said. "I was never allowed to do anything. I was pretty much locked up all the time. It was for my own safety, they said. I never got to make any friends. I remember sitting in my room, staring out the window and watching the notorious Venusian storms rage outside. It must have been really hard for them to send me all the way here." "Where do you live?" I asked. "I mean, here, on the island." "I'll show you." She brought me to an old yellow house at the centre of the island. It was abandoned. Inside, I saw that there was a large hole in the roof. "My capsule crashed right through the ceiling," Zahira said, and pointed at the hole, and then at a rusty object on the floor that looked like an old refrigerator. "That's the capsule?" I asked. "It doesn't look very much like a spaceship." "It wasn't a spaceship," she said. "Lolo carried it." I nodded, trying to avoid looking sceptical. "I know you don't believe me," she said, "but it's okay. No one is supposed to know anyway. Although I don't mind telling you, it doesn't matter anymore. It isn't like there are any redcoats left." She walked to the window and yelled at an old couple that happened to be taking a walk nearby. "I'm from Venus. Hello? Do you hear me? I'm from Venus." She looked back at me. See? No one cares. They're all gone. Eat more over there, my dad said, and tossed the chicken at the edge of my plate. Don't just eat the rice. He continued to stare at me to make sure I did as I was told. Come on, don't just look at the damn chicken. Eat it. I was already full. He always put too much food on my plate, and he never allowed me to do it myself. Reluctantly, I placed some of the chicken in my mouth. I began chewing carefully, but it didn't matter. Don't gobble, my dad said, spitting pieces of food he hadn't swallowed yet. You sound like a fucking pig, for God's sake. Makes me want to puke. I looked down, hyper aware of my jaws moving, fearing that he would lose his temper. I don't want to see a single grain of rice left on the plate. Okay? You're too thin. Do you want to be teased at school? You look like a wimp. I wanted to cry, but I just kept eating and eating and eating. He washed my hands over the sink after I had finally finished. He didn't allow me to wash my own hands, since I would just splash down everything. At least that's what he said. I didn't know at the time that it was just all about control. Zahira was dancing by herself in the middle of a clearing. She was still wearing the same dress as the day I met her. The green sequins glittered like stars in the sunlight. I walked down to her with my hands deep in my pockets. There you are, she said. I was just into the bird song and suddenly felt like dancing. Can you believe it? Dancing! It was such a long time ago. The echo from my dad's rifle bounced between the trunks around us. A few birds flew out of the trees. Is he target practicing again? She asked. It's a shame, he's scaring away all the birds. He's drunk, I said. Can't aim for shit. Zahira giggled. My dad used to hunt in the Royal Forest, she said. He took me with him on a few occasions. I was just a little kid back then. She shied away with her gaze. I always felt so sorry for the poor animals he killed. Now all those animals are gone. For a moment I thought she was about to cry, but she pushed her tears down and regained her cheerful expression. We walked to the meadow and laid on our backs in the grass, watching the blue sky above us. Luna ran around nearby chasing butterflies. They're so white, she said. Back where I come from, the clouds always had a purple shade to them. I'm not sure what caused it, but it was different. As long as we could hear my dad's gun go off in the distance, I knew he was too busy to care about where I was. Hence, each gunshot made me breathe a sigh of relief. We're friends, right? I asked. Of course, Zahira said, still looking at the clouds. You're my only friend on Earth. Will I ever see you again? I mean, after summer break, when I have to go back to the city with my dad. I turned my head to look at her. A tear free and came down her cheek. There's something I haven't told you, she said. I held my breath, fearing the words she was about to speak. I thought she was about to finally tell me the truth about who she was, and that would mean that we would never see each other again. But instead, she said, I'm not supposed to be here. What do you mean? I asked. There was a brave soldier back on Venus. His name was Arav. He was supposed to be our last hope. Our spies had provided us with the blueprints of the device that allowed the British to build their secret weapon. Of course, we couldn't use it on them like they could use it on us, not without destroying ourselves in the process, but we were going to use it to stop their attack in our distant past. Arav was going to be putting a capsule together with one of our most advanced giants. She stopped herself to wipe her tears. Then she turned away from the clouds and looked at me in the eyes. I was so confused when my father woke me up in the middle of the night. He was crying. It was the first time I ever saw him do that. I cried as well when he forced me into the capsule. All I had time to grab from my room was this stupid dress. My dad said that he had changed the directive of Lolo. It was now set to protect me at all cost. He sacrificed our entire planet to save me. She sobbed while she spoke. What an idiot. I thought he didn't care about me, you know. He shouldn't have done it. How could he? I hate him. But I could hear in her voice that that wasn't what she really felt. Lolo still has the device, she continued. I'm going to use it. I'm going to complete Arab's mission and save Venus. That's my plan. All of this entire timeline, is wrong. It was never supposed to be like this. But you're my friend, and I don't want you to be erased together with everyone else here. That's why I want to bring you with me, into the capsule. Why don't you show me? I asked. If you're telling the truth, why don't you show me your time machine and that it works? Oh, don't be silly, she said. I can only use it once. After that, there won't be enough energy left in it to travel back. It was always meant to be a one-way trip. You just have to trust me, okay? You don't have that much time to think about it. Lolo is running out of battery power. I told you. He's dying. We might just have days. Please join me in the capsule. I was just about to ask her to stop pretending and tell me who she really was, a bit angry that she still refused to open up after all this time together, when I realised how long it had been since I had heard Dad's gun go off. My skin crawled at the realisation, and then Zahira said, "Where's Luna?" I stood up, looking around frantically. Luna? She didn't come running as she used to. I kept yelling for her until my voice cracked. Listen, Zahira said. Can you hear it? A faint sound. It was my dad's four-wheeler, driving back to the house from the road. He must have taken her, I said, pallid and in tears. She must have gone down to the road. I should have kept my eyes on her. I'm so stupid. I'm so freaking stupid. Don't say that, Zahira said. It's not your fault. I barely heard what she was saying. She followed me as I ran back to the house, not knowing what to expect. I was too worried to think about what would happen if my dad ever saw me with Zahira again. He was drunk. I could tell immediately from how he stumbled around. The empty beer bottles on the wooden trestle were still intact. He hadn't hit a single one. He held the rifle in his hand. I thought I told you, he said, turning around with the gun pointed at us without thinking about it. I thought I told you not to hang out with that girl anymore. Where's Luna? I asked, fruitlessly trying to spot her. Where is she? Go home, my dad said to Zahira. You're trespassing. I'm not leaving, she said. Where's the dog? Oh, she had to be put down, he slurred. It's what I said would happen, and unlike my ungrateful son, I always keep my word. I panicked. Luna! No response. Luna! You're a monster! Zahira yelled. John has told me all about you, and I'm going to tell everyone what you've been up to here. It can't be legal. You'll be arrested. My dad went quiet for a second, just as if he tried to process what she had just said. I grabbed Zahira's arm and begged her not to provoke him, but she wouldn't listen. You're not going to get away with this, she said. You're... The gun went off. My dad's drunken face turned pallid in an instant. It was just as if his finger had pulled the trigger all on its own. Or rather, as if he had let his finger move on its own just for a split second, before realising what a bad idea it was. The bullet bounced away right in front of Zahira's face, shooting sparks. For a second, we all fell silent. Neither my dad nor I could grasp what had just happened. Then, out of thin air, something incredibly loud and with a synthesized edge to its voice, Drop your weapon and step away from the princess. Slowly, the air in front of Zahira began to vibrate. Patches of rusty metal appeared out of nowhere and grew until an enormous mechanical hand hovered just where the bullet had hit. Its enormous arm followed, and then the rest of its body. It looked at my dad with its red glowing eyes and then down at Zahira. My dad dropped the gun, took a few steps back and fell backwards. He crawled towards the house. This was one of the giants she had been talking about. I thought as it towered above us like an ancient god made out of metal. Zahira looked at me from behind its hand. "Run," she said. "Run to the capsule and don't look back." But, I said, "what about you?" "I told you I'll put everything right. You'll never suffer again. You have to go." "Come with me," I said. "Please, I need you." "I'm sorry," she said. "Uncloaking takes a lot of power. It's now or never. Lolo won't make it to the capsule and I have to stay and give the order. Go, John, please, go." And I ran. The last thing I heard her say was, "It's time, Lolo." The door to the capsule was heavy and the metal squeaked when I finally got it opened. Darkness embraced me when I closed it above me. The silence inside was total. It wasn't until now that I really thought about what was happening and about what was about to happen. I closed my eyes, waiting for something, but nothing happened. After about an hour, I opened the door and crawled outside. I didn't know what to expect. Had the entire world changed? Was the British Empire restored? The island looked the same. It wasn't until I reached my house that I saw in what way everything was different. The grass was neatly trimmed and the beer bottles were gone. I yelled for Zahira, but to no avail. Then, feeling my heartbeat drum against my chest, I yelled for Luna. A few seconds followed, and then someone opened the front door and Luna came running towards me. I fell on my knees, crying tears of relief as she licked my face and wagged her tail. "Who are you?" It was the woman who had opened the door. "I don't think I've seen you around here." She was wearing a white summer dress. For a short moment I didn't recognise her, but then I saw who it was. It was Mom. I couldn't believe my eyes. "You look familiar," she said with a warm smile. "How did you know my dog's name?" "Mom," I said. "Where's Dad?" She didn't know what I was talking about. Dad was gone, just as if he had never existed. My mom had never met him, and I had never been born. But the capsule had preserved me. Although she didn't know who I was, my mom still felt a strong connection to me. After having taken care of me for the rest of the summer, and after a long and drawn-out legal process, she adopted me. I don't think she ever believed me when I told her how I ended up at her house, but she had always wanted a child, and when it became clear to her that I truly didn't have anyone else, she chose to see me as a gift sent from above, and in a way I was. I never saw Zahira again, although I think she's still out there somewhere, and Venus remained a yellow dot in the evening sky. Don't forget, if you enjoyed that story, be sure to pop over to the author's Reddit profile and drop them a line, or even give them a glowing review. I'm sure they would appreciate it. The link to their Reddit profile will be below in the description. And don't forget to check out the merch store. The link will be in the description and also in the video thumbnail. If you would like an honourable mention, send in a snapshot of yourself with your purchase and I will feature it in one of the videos. Have you written a creepypasta story you would like me to narrate? Have you had any cryptid sightings, paranormal or supernatural encounters, or even had a creepy or terrifying situation you would like to share? You could submit your stories, encounters and any other mail to cryptidsroost@gmail.com. If you wish to remain anonymous, that's fine with me. I also have a Facebook group, Twitter, Discord and Reddit, and I have also just created a new Discord community. The link for that will also be in the description. And if you would like to support the channel and help make it grow, my PayPal is paypal.me/cryptidsroost, and any and all donations would be gratefully received. Again, that will also be below. And don't forget, where fear is, happiness is not.